Thank you for joining us for My Wildlife Style Radio, a podcast series for busy wildlife professionals like wildlife rehabilitators, educators, and veterinary staff. I am your host, Emily Davenport, and I am the founder and executive director for the Rocky Mountain Wildlife Alliance. Our mission is to elevate the care and protection of Rocky Mountain wildlife by fostering a sense of community and collaboration among wildlife professionals. Continuing education and training is an important component of our mission. Most wildlife professionals just don't have the time, especially this time of year, to continue their education by looking through journals or sitting for hours, watching training videos, or going to classes. We have designed our content for the busy wildlife professional, so you can learn while you're driving to your center, or working at reports on your desk, or walking your dog when you finally get home at the end of a long day. Rocky Mountain Wildlife Alliance provides continuing education classes both in person and online. In addition, we have created accompanying handouts and podcasts like this one that complement our classes and can be used internally with staff, volunteers, and interns. We evolved out of a clear need. We observed there was no easy, affordable, local way for wildlife rehabilitators or educators to participate in continuing education. It is this need that we are passionate about. Our long-term goal is to open a teaching and research wildlife rehabilitation center where we can provide hands-on learning and training on site to professionals, as well as be a resource for our local community, both our human and wildlife community. Our primary goal is to bring wildlife education, operational resources, and a professional support network to wildlife professionals. We believe helping wildlife rehabilitators and educators experience learning in their preferred format and at their own pace results in better educational outcomes. It is a part of our mission to help make continuing education more affordable and accessible so that more individuals can participate and become even more effective caregivers. Today, I am here with our guest, Jack Murphy, Humane Wildlife Control Operator. Jack Murphy is the co-founder and director of Urban Wildlife Rescue. He is an innovative expert with over 30 years of experience. He is also a Colorado State licensed wildlife rehabilitator. Jack is passionate about education, which is why he's here today, and has spoken about wildlife rehabilitation, wildlife first aid, and humane trapping methods, urban wildlife, and other humane solutions to wildlife problems. He has written Humane Solutions to Wildlife Problems, discussing species-specific humane methods of evicting an animal. His informational packets have been published in several local and national publications and are currently being used by numerous animal control agencies and humane organizations throughout the country. Urban Wildlife Rescue, located in Denver, Colorado, saves over 10,000 lives a year using their humane solutions to wildlife problems. They use various repellents, exclusion, and eviction techniques, which we'll talk about today. Urban Wildlife Rescue is a Colorado-based nonprofit organization. Urban Wildlife Rescue exists because of the generous efforts and dedications of its members and volunteers. So Jack, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it and always excited to talk to you about this sort of thing.
Oh, well, thank you. Really glad to be here.
And I just told you this before the interview, is I have also heard of you referred to as the grandfather of wildlife rehabilitation here in Colorado. You've been doing this a long time, haven't you?
Yeah, I've been doing it for a while, since 1988.
1988, yeah. Oh man. So how did you start out? What got you into wildlife and rehab?
Well, my wife Penny, we both started it together, and we were involved in a lot of animal activism in general, just domestic animals, farm animals, the whole bit. And some friends of ours actually had to leave town, and we babysat their rehab facility while they were gone.
Oh wow.
And we didn't really know rehab existed, and it just kind of gave us a whole new perspective, and that kind of got us started.
Very cool, very cool. That's I always love hearing about how people get into the field and how they get started. So first, we should probably define what nuisance wildlife is and what a nuisance wildlife control operator or a humane wildlife control operator is. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, nuisance wildlife, it's a very kind of a term, like one person's nuisance would be another person's not a nuisance, you know, that type of thing. And so basically an animal that is causing a problem for somebody. So for instance, you know, to me, like if you have an animal living in your house, like I tell people that I believe in coexisting with wildlife but not cohabitating.
Sure.
So if they're in the backyard, it's nothing to be concerned about, maybe. But if they're living in the attic, living in the chimney, living in the crawl space, then in the backyard, if they're living under the shed, under the deck, you know, things like that, and they could be termed as nuisance wildlife.
Okay.
And then, you know, you wanted to, what a humane wildlife control operator is?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be solving the problem in a way that's the least stressful for the animal as possible.
Okay.
And so
You kind of help them, the property owner and the wildlife kind of coexist together. As long as they're like not in the home or in
Right.
the attic or under the porch or something
Probably
like that.
90% of my phone calls require education.
Sure.
So
Oh,
it's
yeah.
very rare that, like my wife used to tell me I was really good at talking myself out of work. And I don't do it because I don't like work, because I do love to work. But the thing is I'm not going to rip somebody off and go out when I don't have to.
Sure.
And most of the time, or I shouldn't say, well, yeah, probably 90% of the time, people perceive they have a problem, but once they realize what's going on, they don't have a problem.
Okay, so
Yeah.
what would be like a good example of like a problem they think they might have?
Well, the
but-
one that I always use is like when people will call me up and go, we just moved into a new house and there's a fox in our neighborhood and we have children.
Oh, gotcha.
And so right away they think the fox is going to kill the dog, eat the children, you know, the whole bit. And once I educate them and let them know that, no, the fox is going to take care of your mouse problem and it's not going to hurt anybody, you know, and all this stuff. You mellow them out and they go, oh, okay. And that's the end of that.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes sense. That it really is a huge part of what any wildlife professional does is education, isn't it?
Right. It really is. A lot of people really don't know that much about wildlife.
All right. So you are the guy that people call when they perceive they have a problem with wildlife then?
Right.
Perfect. So a lot of professionals, a lot of wildlife control operators claim they use humane methods. I know you and I have talked about this in the past. But again, I guess I kind of just want to define what humane is and what really makes a wildlife control operator humane, and what can we do you know, to help educate everybody about who is truly humane and who is not.
Yeah, humane is a word that's kind of been thrown around. Like I go to a lot of meetings with a lot of the wildlife control operators, and they all think they're humane. I even had one guy that was telling me, and this was back 10 years ago, he said he was humane because like if he has a small mammal in a trap, he, rather than CO2 him in a CO2 chamber, he'll just reach in there with a glove, grab the animal and squash their head against the bumper of the truck. And he considered that humane. Well, you know, so that's why I say humane is like a relative term. To me, like there's no such thing as humane trapping.
Gotcha.
So any operator that says, I trap and relocate, well, basically you're killing the animal, you're just not doing it directly. There's different figures on different animals. Studies that have been done, there was a study done with squirrels and the survival rate is about 3% of a relocated squirrel. A raccoon is about 18%. Fox, coyote, less than 5%. And so when you relocate an animal, you're not doing him any favors. And so as a humane operator, what I try and do is basically get the animal to leave without trapping or relocating it. I let them relocate themselves.
Gotcha.
So-
All right, that's pretty cool. So what can we do then as individuals, as professionals, or as property owners if we have to call somebody like you? How can we be sure they're using truly humane methods?
That's really tough. We're actually working on that right now with a group of people, trying to come up with a list of humane operators. As far as I know, I'm the only one in the state that
Yeah, I
does,
think so
you
too.
know, humane wildlife control. And there's only a handful of us in the country at this point. We are finding new people, but it's a really slow process. But, you know, for the average homeowner, if you're hiring somebody, for the most part, you can tell them what you want them to do. You know, I've had people call me from all over the country with the group Animal Help Now.
Yeah.
I'm listed for anybody that's got a problem in the country. Me and a girl in Florida both will help anybody that has a problem. And I've had several people call me. They've got no humane wildlife control operators in their area.
Sure.
But the trappers do know what one-way doors are.
Okay.
And so I will tell them, like if you're going to hire somebody, tell them do not trap the squirrels that are in your attic. Use a one-way door. And if this guy you're talking to doesn't know what a one-way door is, he's not your guy. They should know what a one-way door is.
That's a good
A lot of the
advice.
trappers will say the one-way doors don't work. They'll try and talk you out of it. But like one of the trappers one time told me, he says, I know the one-way doors work, but I make a lot more money if I trap. So it all boils down to money. The one-way doors work just fine.
Yeah,
You know,
all right,
so.
great. And we'll talk more about one-way doors later too.
Okay.
I'm excited to get to some of your methods. All right, so we talked a little bit about what makes a wildlife control operator humane. We talked a little bit about humane methods. We'll get into that in a little more detail in a few minutes. But I oftentimes like to talk about prevention. Prevention is really key to, as far as human-wildlife conflicts go. So
Sure.
I always love using the term, it's better to be proactive than reactive to a problem. And that's certainly the case when it comes to human-wildlife conflicts. So what can homeowners do to protect their home from unwanted guests before it becomes a problem or a perceived problem?
Sure, yeah, there's a lot of things people can do. Matter of fact, I've had customers over the years that move, and when they move into a new house, they call me up and want me to come out and animal-proof it before they even move in. And the way I use it, I always say it's easier to keep them out than to get them out.
Yeah.
And so things to do as far as the structure of the house goes, make sure the door is closed tight. They have weather stripping under them so mice can't go under doors. Any holes in the foundation should be sealed up. On the roof, depending on the kind of roof vents, there are certain kinds of roof vents that squirrels like to go through. If it has a fan vent, it's like a big vent with a fan that keeps the attic cool. Sometimes raccoons can go through those. They don't even have screen in them. And the louvered vents on the side of the house, they have louvered vents. A lot of times those are made out of real thin sheet metal. Raccoons just rip them right out and move right in. And so anything like that can be done. As far as the yard goes, they can do things like animal proofing a deck or a concrete slab, digging a little trench and burying wire down like in an L shape. So for instance, concrete. In Colorado, we have bentonite soil, so a lot of times the soil drops, you have hollow spots under the concrete, especially along the foundation. And so that's a favorite spot for rabbits, skunks, and foxes.
Gotcha.
And so what you can do is dig a little trench. Usually, if you really want to do it right, go down about 10 or 12 inches and out about a foot, and then bury wire and bury it down 8 or 10 inches and out a foot, and put the dirt back in. You won't even see it really, and that'll keep animals from burrowing under concrete. You can do it with decks. I go from the deck down into the ground a few inches and come out. Same thing with sheds, you can do that. They're the kind of places that animals would like to live in.
Okay, yeah, you can probably see me looking up and thinking about all the things you're saying because in the home that I grew up in, we constantly had a problem with mice.
Right.
We used to have bird feeders, so we finally did away with our bird feeders, but we still had a mouse problem, and now I believe my parents still have a rabbit problem. And so all these things you're saying, I'm like, oh my gosh, that makes perfect sense. It's a shame people go straight to pest control versus, humane solutions like this or just prevention. So,
well, a lot of times they're not even solving the problem. I mean, I've had people that they've got, the pest control guy coming out and setting mice bait stations. And how long have you had these bait stations there? Maybe 10 years. Well, he obviously didn't solve the problem if you still have mice. So you don't have a mouse problem, you have a hole in your house. That's why you have a mouse problem. So you patch up the holes, that solves the problem permanently. I had a lady I was talking to a couple of years ago, and she was calling me about foxes or something. In the course of the conversation, she just happened to mention, she said, my husband and I have been trapping squirrels for the last 8 years. I said, well, why are you doing that? And she said, well, they keep getting into our roof. And I said, have you ever patched a hole? She said, no. And I explained to her that she's going to be trapping squirrels until she dies, and then you're still going to have squirrels. You're not going to get rid of them.
Yeah. So there really is a lot we can do then, prevention-wise.
Yeah, chimney caps, that's another thing.
Yeah.
Chimney caps very important, especially this time of year.
Yes.
It's late March, and raccoons are getting ready to have babies. And when we see a hollow tree, we cut it down. And to a raccoon, that's where they like to have their babies. So instead, we build chimneys, which is like an artificial hollow tree.
Makes
and
sense.
They do like to have their babies down in chimneys.
And then it's awfully hard for those little guys to get out sometimes.
Well, the little guys can't. The mom will get out, and that's where we run into problems too, because they can be evicted. I mean, I use methods that I use to get the mother to move and take the babies, but then we also get the people that start a fire. And they don't realize the mother can get out and take one baby, and the rest of the baby's baked.
Right.
So we run into that every once in a while.
I'm sure. So that brings up a good point, actually, because oftentimes wildlife rehabilitators have to deal with the aftermath of problems like that. Homeowners taking it upon themselves to evict a parent and not realizing there's still babies in the attic, or like you said, lighting a fire and then babies get injured and burned and things of that nature. So what can we as wildlife rehabilitators do to help educate the public? Because oftentimes we then get called with these orphans after a parent has been trapped and relocated, or a parent has been killed, or babies are sealed in a home after the parent goes away. So what can we do to be better educators?
Well, I think just the community and the wildlife rehab community in general needs to do what they can to educate the public, because a lot of times we get the calls after the fact.
Right.
I mean, because I get those calls too where somebody says, oh, we relocated a raccoon 3 days ago and now we got 5 baby raccoons in the garage. And the do-it-yourselfers are dangerous. I mean, if somebody's going to be a do-it-yourselfer, they're going to be doing drywall, they're working on the car, that's fine. But when you're dealing with a living being, the do-it-yourselfers can be really scary. And the trappers do it too. I think that a lot of the animals that rehabbers get come from either a homeowner with a trap, or they hire a trapper. And a lot of times the trappers, I mean, I've had people that hire a trapper and the trapper comes out and traps the raccoon and takes off. Then when they find out there's babies, the trapper doesn't want anything to do with it. He just says, your problem, not mine.
Well, and you made a good point last time we got together too, is oftentimes these quote unquote humane trappers will trap an animal, either an adult or the orphans, and then take it to a wildlife rehabilitator thinking they're doing a good thing, but that doesn't necessarily solve the problem either, and can actually add to the problem, don't you think?
Well, it adds to the problem, and basically, I remember, this has got to be 30 years ago. There was a pest control guy, and he had, I think it was a baby squirrel. I can't remember what it was. And he called me up and says, I got a baby squirrel, we trapped the mother, blah, 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 blah. And so he wanted to bring me this baby squirrel. So I said, okay, I'll take the baby squirrel. And that guy started showing up at my house 3 or 4 times a week with a baby something. He used me as a dumping ground.
Right.
And that's the problem that rehabbers are going to have when they start taking, because I've talked to rehabbers around the country that say, oh, this guy, this trapper we know, he's great because he brings us all the babies. Well, he's not great. He's just dumping his mistakes off on you.
Right.
He doesn't have to worry about doing the job right. If he does the job wrong and messes something up, he can dump the babies on you. And he makes a whole bunch of money, and it costs you thousands of dollars.
Right. Yeah. No, that's the point I was hoping you would bring up. So what can we do as a wildlife rehab community then? Do we just say no?
It's painful, but yes, that's one way to do it. I mean, a lot of times now because I still get rehab calls, and I will get some of the trappers that'll call me up and go, oh, we just orphaned a bunch of raccoons, can you take them? And I tell them, no, I can't. I cannot take them. I'm not here to fix up your mistakes.
Do you worry then what happens to those orphans?
I do.
But you're putting your foot down and you're doing what you feel is best.
It's like something I learned a long time ago. You try and save everything, but you can't.
Yeah, you can't.
And so on one of these things, like again, I've just seen it too many times, and not just from my experience, but talking with other rehabbers around the country, that once you start taking orphaned animals that these guys orphaned, they will just start dumping on you. Yeah. And it's a shame. It's really not cool, but that's the way it is.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important point, and I agree with you that you can't save them all, and sometimes the best thing you can do for the general population or for those orphans in the future is to say no.
Yeah.
So now that we've kind of talked about your methods and what makes a professional humane versus not humane, I'd love to know a little more about what methods you have used over the years, and kind of what has gotten you to the point today to use the methods that you use.
Well, most of it for me, I didn't have anybody to learn from.
Right.
And when I first started doing wildlife control, I was trapping and relocating. And then the science started coming in, showing that relocation is not a good thing. And about that time, I was doing a lecture, and at the back of the room, they had a display booth set up with all kinds of bird deterrents and things like that, and there was a one-way door there. And I looked at it, and I thought, this, to me, it was like a eureka moment. But when I was a kid, one of our neighbors taught us how to make a rabbit trap, the same principle, using angled doors. And it was like, why didn't I think of this? This is perfect, And so I went home and made my own one-way door, just using 1 by 1/2 inch welded wire and a 2x4 and a hammer. And I tried using it on a couple of jobs, and it worked perfect. So then I bought a sheet metal brake, and now I make my own one-way doors. But it's just, you know, the one-way door ends up being probably the primary thing that I use. But it's just like a lot of the trappers will say, oh, you can't use a one-way door during baby season. Like, oh, but you can trap? No, you can't do that
Right.
neither. So you can't, you have to be really careful during baby season no matter what you do. And so like right now, like I've been using one-way doors for raccoons quite a bit in the last month and a half. But I won't use them starting right about now because they could be giving birth as we speak. It's really that close. And so the one-way doors are my primary method. Some animals are easier to deal with than others. You know, like if you got squirrels in an attic, they give birth twice a year, so you got to be basically paranoid about 6 months out of the year with squirrels. Birds are starting to nest, but they don't have babies yet, so you can kind of destroy the nest, get them out, you know, especially if they're nesting in like a dryer vent. They'll get into things like that. And so I try and use, you know, a very, I would say a natural method first, not using any devices. Like for instance, numerous times I've had raccoons up in attics and I go up in the attic and just chase them around for 2 minutes and they run out and I patch up the hole and I'm done. I've had mothers with babies in an attic and you get up there and you talk to the mother for a little bit, you take their picture, you go back the next day and they're gone. So sometimes it's really simple. And then other times I advance and, you know, I have other methods that I take. And a lot of that is also educating the homeowner because you'll have one homeowner that's got raccoons in their chimney and they're like, well, you know, if they're going to be gone in 8 or 10 weeks, why don't we just leave them there and that's fine. You have other people that, oh my God, there's a raccoon in the chimney and it's got to get out of there now.
Gotcha.
And they're freaking out. So it has to go along with what the customer is willing to put up with. So that's
So
part of it
do you think the best thing to do is wait if the owners are willing to
That's
wait?
what I try and, especially chimney. In chimney, I usually tell people, because a lot of times when people call me, they've already called several people. And they'll go, we talked to a trapper, and they talked about rabies, and they talked about fleas, and they talked about things. They always give you all the negative to try and scare you, which is not cool. And there's very rarely a problem leaving raccoons in a chimney. And I let the people know, and I let them know what potential problems could be. Like, for instance, the mom could go out to eat and get hit by a car.
Sure.
Now they got a bunch of babies that are going to die in the chimney if somebody doesn't get them out. But if they leave them, like I tell them, at some point, mom's going to get tired of nursing and she's taking them out. That's the way the process works with raccoons, you know. And so most people that I talk to are willing to do that. And then you have the people that don't want to do that, and then they say, well, how much does it cost to get them out? And then when you tell them how much it's going to cost, then all of a sudden they get really humane and say, oh, okay, well, maybe we'll wait for it. And I tell
Funny
them,
how that happens.
yeah, and I tell them you can leave them. I say, you know, you don't have to think about it now. I say, you know, the babies are probably only a couple of weeks old. Let it go for a couple of weeks. If it's driving you nuts, we can always get them out. But if you can wait them out, that's the best thing. Once they're out, give me a call. We'll put a chimney cap on so they don't come back next year and we're done.
Very cool. Now, at a conference I went to recently, we learned about one-way doors, of course, and a lot about reuniting boxes,
Right.
Both for squirrels and raccoons. Do you have any experience using those, and how well have they worked for you?
Yeah, fortunately, I don't need to use them a lot.
Okay.
Because the way that I evict the animal, my job is to get mom to leave and take the babies with them.
Oh, okay.
And so most of the time I can do that. When they can't, sometimes I use a makeshift box. Like for something like squirrels, I can just take a cardboard box, and you have to be real careful because you need to put it where the entry is. And so the way I've done it before is if you know the mom is not there, then you can put the babies outside in a box right next to where the hole was, because I've now patched up the hole.
Okay.
Or I put in, if I'm not sure if the mother's out, I put in a one-way door. So that if she's in the attic, she can get out. When she gets out, her babies are right there in the box. And of course, if the babies are really small little pinkies, they can't, you know, keep themselves warm. And so you've got a problem. If they're going to stay out overnight, they're not going to survive. So you want to try and do that early in the day, you know, and then hope it's not a day where it's 5 degrees out, you know, things like that. So I try and get the mother to move and take the babies out. A lot of times with squirrels, I can convince people to wait till the mother starts taking them out. Because like, when I call people, on average, they'll say, yeah, we've been hearing noise up there for the last 4 months. And I go, okay, well, the baby squirrels are now 2 months old. They're probably going to be out within about a month. So is another month going to make a big difference?
Right.
You know, and so a lot of times people are willing to wait. And so I try and do what's best for the animal, also taking into consideration what's best for the homeowner. But I try and educate the homeowner so that they can make the best decision. You know, and, you know, I just, like, they have to make the decision, but there's certain areas I won't go. I'm not going to trap. I'm definitely not going to kill, you know, that type of thing. And so most people are pretty understanding about it,
Okay.
you know.
In your experience, when and if you do have to reunite, the babies with the mother, is there a certain time frame that you have to do it in?
Well, you want to do it the sooner the better. I
Right.
would say if it's getting past 2 or 3 days, you're getting
Okay.
to the point where they're probably orphaned. You
Okay.
know, you know, with raccoons, I've actually got some raccoon nesting boxes that are made for raccoons, and I've had them for probably 15 years, and I'm trying to think of it. I think I used them once or twice, because I didn't always carry them in the truck all the time because they're pretty big. And so a lot of times what I'll do is just use a carrier. And matter of fact, I did one up in Broomfield here, was it 2 years ago? It was an office building on the other side of the highway over there. And no, where was it? It was up this way. And the raccoon mother got into an air conditioning system and got into, she was living in the ductwork, but the ductwork was soft, the soft ductwork, and she broke out of that and got loose in the ceiling of the building, and it was 38,000 square foot
Oh, wow.
building. And I was trying to get her out of there for weeks, probably about 2 or 3 weeks, and we couldn't get her. Finally, somebody in the next office building over heard something in the wall. And I went out there, she was in the wall, and the maintenance guys were there. Well, I cut the wall open, got the babies out, got mom out, and then there was a little pond in the office park where this happened, and I took them over there, and the mom got out of the carrier while I was setting everything up. She got out, she broke the carrier and got out and took off, and I put the babies in a carrier, and I leave the door open, but just put a rock in front of it. And I came back a while later, and the rock was moved, and the door was open, and the babies were gone. So she came and took them. And so a lot of times I'll just use a carrier, especially if it's in the daytime and you've just evicted a raccoon. She's going to be back within a few minutes to an hour after you're gone. And so I like the idea of just taking that carrier. Sometimes I'll just even put it up against a wall, with the door up against a wall and a rock against the back of it, so that the babies can't push on the door and push it open.
Okay.
And then the mom will just come and turn the carrier around and open it up and take it
Yeah,
out.
it's amazing the instinct, most mothers, not just raccoons, but squirrel mothers, skunk mothers for that matter, what an instinct they have to just come back for those babies.
Well,
It's like they can't help themselves.
Every animal, I mean, a human mother's going to do the same thing. They're no different than we are.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
they
no, I
they want
agree.
to take care of their babies. You know?
Absolutely. So earlier in the interview, you mentioned working with a group of individuals to try and create a database, for lack of a better term, of humane wildlife operators. That group happens to be one of the Rocky Mountain Wildlife Alliance's other partner, Animal Help Now.
Right.
So can you tell me a little more about your relationship with Animal Help Now and what you guys are trying to create?
Yeah, you know, I've been working with them kind of since they started, just on helping them with ideas on the wildlife side of it, because, you know, I've been doing it for a long time. But yeah, right now what we're trying to do, because they added rehabilitation. At first it was for injured animals, more like dogs and cats, and then it became for injured wildlife too, and they started listing wildlife rehabilitators. And then they decided to start doing humane wildlife control operators, because it's like, in my perception, like from when I used to rehab, you know, my wife and I used to do about 250 to 300 animals a year. But with our Humane Solutions, helping people with wildlife problems, it's down 10 to 15,000 a year. So we can help a lot of people by doing that. And so I think Animal Help Now realized the same thing. The problem is that most people don't know. They just call up a, you know, a pest control guy, for lack of a better word, and you know, they think that they're all humane. I know back in the day when I first got into doing this, we were actually looking for somebody to refer to, and we started calling some of the trappers up, and we quickly realized that, yeah, these guys are not real humane. Right. And so what we're trying to do now is make it so that if you are anywhere in the country and you have a problem with wildlife, you can use Animal Help Now in order to find a humane wildlife control operator in your area. The biggest problem is that there's not that many humane wildlife control operators out there. So like I said, I have talked to people and tell them, well, if you're going to hire this guy, here's the questions you should ask. Here's what you should do. Here's what you should look for.
And what are some of those questions?
Well, the main one would be, the first thing I would ask them is, do you trap? And they go, yes. And they're going to say yes, because that's what they usually do. And you ask them if they can do a one-way door, do an exclusion rather than trapping. And if they say, no, we can't do that, then you don't want to hire that guy.
Gotcha.
You know, so trapping is not humane. I mean, people always say, oh, it's a humane trap. There's no such thing as a humane trap. I've seen squirrels and prairie dogs die in cage traps. They're not humane. Trapping, doesn't matter what kind of trap it is, they're not humane, you know. And so, you know, you want to hire somebody that's going to be doing an exclusion, And they also have to know, is it baby season? And that's a biggie right there, because, I've had some of the trappers that, they'll go out there and they'll trap a mother, and then when the babies die and the people are complaining about the smell, they charge them extra money to go out and cut holes in the wall to pull out the dead ones. And it's like, not good, so.
Do you know if there's any movement right now kind of in the animal control field for, is there continuing education that animal control officers take part in on like a national scale?
By animal control, you mean like basically like the dog and cat people?
Well, maybe I should have just stuck with the humane wildlife control operator.
The humane wildlife control operators, they do put on a lot of classes.
Okay.
And again, they do believe in trapping. They do believe in urban shooting. So shooting deer in urban areas, shooting coyotes in urban areas. Right now, a big thing that's real popular is pellet guns. They use pellet guns on coyotes. The pellet guns are not the little pellet guns we grew up with. They're like a 22 and bigger, And so, so they do have continuing education. I actually went to one of their classes last week, and it was more of a conference, but there were people there that were educating. And so, they have different viewpoints of what I have. To them, when there's a problem, you solve the problem. Generally, it's by killing the animal. And I believe that the problem can be solved without killing the animal. Like I tell people again, like when they have a raccoon in their roof, it's not the raccoon is not the problem. The problem is you have a hole in your roof.
Right.
And so fix the hole in the roof and the problem's solved.
All right. Well, maybe in time, the more we educate the public, the more we educate ourselves as wildlife rehabilitators, maybe there will be more of a push for a movement towards those humane methods as well.
It is getting better. It
Good.
is getting better, and we're seeing it nationwide. I mean,
Good.
more and more people are trying to be more humane about that. And I've also had people that they call me up and they say, we've already talked to 10 different companies and we don't feel comfortable with them. And then when I tell them what I do, they go, oh, this sounds perfect, And so people are looking for that option, and, it's like a lot of the, I'm trying to think the right word, like the consumptive use of wildlife, killing wildlife is going away. Even like the numbers of hunters are dropping, the number of trappers is dropping. This stuff is going away, and so people are tending to want to be more humane, and a lot of that's because we're better educated now. I mean, we know more about animals than we've ever known. Science is teaching us more about animal behavior, animal emotions, the way they think. A lot of the young kids growing up with Animal Planet and all this kind of stuff, and so our views on wildlife is changing for the better. It's just not going to change by next weekend.
Yep, it won't change overnight, that's
No.
for sure. Definitely takes time. So I always like to end on kind of a fun story or something from your experience that has touched you over the years, or something along those lines. So do you have a story from your 30 years of doing this that you can share with us?
Boy, there's a whole bunch of
Yeah,
them. But
I bet.
One of my favorites, and I like this one. I use this every once in a while when I do a speaking engagement because it shows the dedication of a mother, and then also the lack of aggression by a raccoon, because the general consensus by the average person is that raccoons are really aggressive animals, and if you corner one, they're going to attack. And I learned years ago that if you corner one, they might charge you, but they have no intention of attacking. If you just stand there and look at them, they just kind of go, oh, sorry, and they turn around and walk away. I've never had a raccoon attack me. I've been bitten by them, but whenever I've been bitten, it's me grabbing them. So I was the aggressor, I deserved it. But one of my favorite stories, and this happened probably about 15 years ago, and it was up in a town up outside of Boulder. And this woman called me up, and she had a mother raccoon and 3 babies in her kitchen.
Oh, wow.
And so I went driving up there, and when I got there, I started talking to the lady and found out that she had been born in this house. She lived there until she got married. Then her and her husband lived in the house. Then her husband died, and she still lived in this house. So she remembers the house when she was a little kid, and they had a wood-burning stove in the kitchen. But when they took the wood-burning stove out, they just patched the pipe up. They had, it looks like a metal pipe plate. They just put over the pipe. And that blocked the pipe off. Well, apparently that thing popped out, and the babies fell into her kitchen, and then the mother jumped into the kitchen to be with her babies. Well, the woman didn't explain to me she was also a hoarder. And she was kind of a neat hoarder. It wasn't like everything was piled up in messes, but the whole house was boxes and bags stacked up about shoulder high with paths from room to room.
Wow.
And so when I got out there, the mother raccoon and the 3 babies were sitting in a corner next to one of those old sewing machines with the foot pedals.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I went walking over there, the mother and 1 baby kind of took off. And I grabbed the other 2 babies, and I got everything set up. There was a window in the kitchen, and I opened the window, and I put a board on the outside like a ramp, and I put the 2 babies in the box. And then I had to find the mother and the other baby. And I looked around this house for probably over an hour, and I don't even know what the rooms were I was in, because the rooms were so filled with stuff, and I was trying to move stuff and move bags and move boxes, and I could not find her. So I walked back in the kitchen, and I'm really frustrated, and all of a sudden the mom takes off across the kitchen, but she's along a wall. And the baby that was with her decides to take the shortcut and go like diagonally to like the closest distance to the mom. And when the baby did that, I reached out and grabbed the baby. And as soon as I grabbed that baby, I heard this really blood-curdling scream, this rah, the raccoon squeal. And the raccoon came running at me, and I was backing up through the kitchen while the raccoon was trying to climb up my legs. And the first thought in my mind was, I'll go ahead and get this all done, then I'll go to the hospital and get stitched up, because I thought I was going to get hurt. And I was backing up through the kitchen, backing up, she's screaming, trying to climb my legs. I'm taking my knees and trying to push her off of me. I turn around and put the baby in the box. The minute I put the baby in the box, the screaming stopped. She jumped up on the windowsill. And when she did that, I pushed her out of the window, and the board was there, so she just landed on the board, and I closed the window. She came running back and hit the window screaming.
Oh, wow.
And so I picked up the box of babies, and there was a big cottonwood tree in the woman's yard, right off the side yard. And so I took the box out there, set it down at the tree, and then yelled at the mom. She was still at the window screaming, and I yelled at her, and she turned around and looked at me, and I backed off. And then she came walking over, and she grabbed the babies, and she started taking them up into the tree. And that one there just impressed me, because when I was all done, I checked and I did not have a single scratch on me. She could have torn my legs to shreds. She could have ripped my kneecaps off, because she had the power to do that. She didn't. All she wanted was her babies.
Aww.
And she just only had her mind on her babies. Didn't want nothing to do with me. I was just just there. But that story, that just impressed me, because it showed the dedication she had. I mean, here you got a little 20-pound raccoon facing a 190-pound guy, and she's trying to climb up me just to get her baby back, and it's like, wow. And the dedication, I mean, like just watching her with the babies, because me and the lady, we sat in the house watching out the door, and we watched her taking the babies up in the tree, and it was like, wow, this is very cool.
It is amazing, like I said, that instinct and that absolute dedication for their
Oh,
babies.
yeah.
They are just like us in that way, where
Yeah, like I tell them, the only thing, they're just a different package.
Yeah.
But the same emotions, same thing, And we say we're smarter than the animals, but I have to question that sometimes.
Oh, I question it too, actually. Well, awesome, Jack. Well, this has been absolutely wonderful talking with you. Anytime I get a chance to sit and talk with you and learn from you, it's a treat. So thank you so much for coming up here and talking with me today, and teaching our listeners about truly humane methods and what we can do as professionals. So thank you again.
Well, thank you. And if there's anybody that's listening to this has a problem, feel free to give me a call, and can do what I can do to help out.
And where can they call you?
Urban Wildlife Rescue. It's 303-340-4911.
Perfect. And we'll put this information on our Facebook page and our website as well. So, all right. Thanks again, Jack. And thank you all for listening.
All right. Thank you.
If listeners would like to share this podcast, it is free and available for everyone. You can find this podcast and others on our website, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, and more. Tell us what you think of our show by using the hashtags MyWildLifestyle and MyWildLifestyleRadio. If you would like more information on this topic or the accompanying handout for this podcast, they can be found in our resource center and on our blog. Also stay informed and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Thank you all for joining us for My Wild Lifestyle Radio. I look forward to bringing you more topics in the future soon.